This is Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? It is a fantastic day because I have just my dear, dear friend, Mary Marantz, on the show for not the first, not the second, maybe not even the third, but we think it might be the third. I don't know. We've lost count at this point. Mary Marantz is here for the third, fourth, fifth, who knows what time. Mary, I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome.
Oh my gosh, Molly, I love you with my whole puffy heart. Thank you so much for having me back, maybe even back again.
I know.
We talked about velvet jackets last time,
You did.
so
Yeah,
gonna expect that.
you got the imaginary velvet jacket
Yes.
on your last time, and I'm telling you, like, you were one of the first to receive the very sought after
Yeah,
velvet jacket with
that's
my
right.
face on it.
Listen, I want it big. I want it like all across my back with wings.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was thinking about this as I was kind of just doing prep for this episode and all of that. And I was trying to think, like, and maybe we've talked about this before, but I was like thinking back on when we first met. And then I was thinking about, I was like, well, I know we knew each other for a little while before we met in person, but I mean, it has been 10 years since
Wild.
we both spoke at that conference in Charleston.
Yeah.
That was in 2015. And
Wow.
so, like, we've known each other well over a decade now,
Isn't
which
that
is just,
wild?
how did that happen?
I don't know.
Like, it doesn't feel like it both is like, feels like I've known you a long time, and then also doesn't feel like I've known you over a decade. And so just watching you over the years as you have, shifted from photography to writing and speaking to this is now you're about to release your third book, is just incredible. And it's such a gift to be able to witness. And so I just wanted to say that right off the bat as I'm just so dang proud of you,
Oh my
and just
gosh.
what a gift that you are putting out into the world. You are living out First Peter 4:10 of using the gifts that God's given you.
Mm.
To serve others, and you do that through your podcast and through your writing. And I always tell you this too, and this book is no different, is you are a painter with words.
Ooh, I
Like,
like that.
you really are. And this book is that. And so with all of that, like, me just starting off just by telling you how wonderful you are.
Listen, can I start every day this way?
I
That
know,
would be
you're
so
welcome. You just have me just to wake you up. Good morning, Mary. You are amazing. Well, so we need you to have us give us the Mary 301, because the last time you were on, you gave the Mary 201, and that was kind of the update. So here we are. We're becoming like, we're getting PhDs in Mary Marantz over here. So give us the Mary 301. So, like, since you released your second book, Slow Growth, and now you've got Underestimated coming, like, what's been happening in your life?
Well, I feel like the short answer is underestimated. That's basically all I've done for the last year and a half. Like, no joke, I wrote for 12 hours a day for 12 months to get this book out into the world. It is the heaviest lift I've done on any of the three books by far. And it's also the one I'm the most proud of, which is a big statement because Dirt is my first book. And that's, my story of growing up in a single wide trailer before going on to Yale for law school and going, this sort of journey back home to make peace with your past. And what is a story like that we're sort of familiar with, the humble beginnings to the Ivy League? What does that look like through the lens of grace? And then Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots is, a book about once you make peace with your past, how do you give up achieving for your worth? And so they have all sort of built on one another, leading us to Underestimated, which is now that you've made peace with your past and now that you're no longer achieving for your worth, you're, creating and building and working from worth rather than for worth. What does it look like for us to quit playing small on the good work that's been prepared for us in advance? And so, I feel like we always talk about you write the book that you need. And I feel like I've spent 45 years preparing to, to write about being underestimated, and we can get into all of it. But I thought it was going to be a book about when the world underestimates us. And it for sure is, that's in there, but it ended up being about 80% when we do it to ourselves. So that was fun
Yeah.
to wrestle through for 12 hours a day. Why do we do this to ourselves?
Well, I feel like that actually kind of leads me to I had kind of a few things from the book that I haven't had a chance to finish it yet, but I did start it because I just got
Okay.
a copy.
I know. You were the champ. It was like, "Hi, can you do this in 3 days?" Great.
Yeah, so I've been speed reading, but so I have started it. But and I tell you, like I said, this is so you in so many ways. And so I actually feel like one of the points I wanted to hit is a great starting point, no pun intended. And that's sort of this starting line. And this is from
Mm,
your chapter one, and you talk about how starting over is a rolling boulder. I want to read an excerpt. It says, day by day, some of us are out here unraveling a lifetime of limiting beliefs, turning lead weights tied up around our ankles. Forgive us if we get tripped up. We're doing the work. It's just that our work involves healing decades old traumas, moving away from wild eyed scarcity to finally believing once and for all we've stumbled our way into safety. It's sorting through the generations deep tangle of beliefs about what we are capable of and what happens to a person when they finally get. And it's this like, oh my gosh, it's this you write so tenderly
mm,
about how long it takes some of us to even begin to
yeah.
something. And so I want you to kind of speak to that, of speak to the person listening who feels behind
Ooh,
or
yeah.
late or that they are like too messy to reach their potential. And the reason I felt led to talk about this to start off is because I turned 40 this year.
Yeah.
And I feel like I keep talking about this on the podcast because it's like this looming thing that is ahead. But I say that in a lot of ways, like, I'm not afraid to turn 40. I'm actually very excited to turn 40.
Nice.
I feel like the 40s, I feel like I'm ready for my 40s. Like I'm ready to live my best life in my 40s.
Yes.
But there are a lot of things that I, in a lot of ways, want to do. And I will admit that I sometimes wrestle with a, is it too late? Like, am I too late? And so that's why I kind of wanted to start at that point. So would you kind of just talk about that, about why this is such a big part of this book?
Yeah. Let me just start with the 40s because let me tell you something. When I was 20, 25, and I heard women in their 40s saying, listen, your 40s are amazing. You like run out of filters. You run out of like twisting
No.
yourself. Yeah, yeah, basically. Basically. I was like, oh, the lies these women have to tell themselves, you know? I'm here to tell you, I'm gonna be 45 in May. I'm here to tell you I can speak from the midway up the mountain on the 40s, and it is everything they said and more. Like, there will be hard things for sure, you know, physical, like body things, like hormones are a very real thing, whatever. This is not what I thought we were going to talk about, but that's okay. But like the unraveling, and there's a lot in that. I think you see a lot of that in Underestimated. There's a part where I talk about we were not meant to be this silent screaming string of pretty maids all in a row, this cut and paste, paint by numbers, repeating, you know, what the world tells us to be. It's much more poetic in the book, but that's the general idea. And I think there is this unraveling, this unstitching, coming apart at the seams where the light can get in between this before and this after. All of that happens in your 40s, and I'm here for it.
Mm,
And I'm so excited to meet Molly in her 40s.
you. Thank
I
you.
think it's going to be real good.
Oh, fun.
So all of that to say, I think that the society would love to tell us that if we haven't done it by the time we turn 40, we're not going to do it. And it's just not true. You know, most of us, this is of course not guaranteed, but for most of us, we're hoping we're going to be well into our 70s, our 80s, our 90s and beyond. And that's a lot of time to say life's pretty much done for me when
Mm,
I hit 40, right? So we are just getting started. I just wanted to speak to that.
yeah.
Yes, about this idea of feeling, I liked this, what you said about if you feel too messy to do what you were put here to do, you feel like you're behind, you feel like it's too late. It's already too late is one of fear's most boring and favorite lies to use on us. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, if you're being a boring, really boring liar. But I even want to kind of like just sit in that edginess for a second. And I want to speak to the person listening. And I bet it's a bunch of people listening where it's all of that we've been talking about. And it's also this other thing where you feel like whatever you have tried to do in life, it's as if you're pushing up against resistance. You're pushing up against a brick wall. You know, you're trying to climb the mountain. There's a running metaphor through the whole book of pushing the boulder up the mountain only to get to almost to your breakthrough moment. You blink, you lose your grip, you lose your way, and the boulder rolls all the way back down the mountain. Meanwhile, other people, they implement, they execute, they achieve. They just keep right on trucking Elwood style. What? Like it's hard? And you can't understand why you keep starting over or why every step feels like it's like waist deep through molasses. If you are listening to this and you are what I like to lovingly call a hard story person, whether that was when you were little or it's been a more recent hard story, and it just feels like no matter what you do, no matter your best efforts, it's like the more you try to push up the mountain, there's like a 10-ton force
Mm,
pushing you back down.
yeah.
This book is for you. And so that whole first chapter is about like, let's just lay it all out there. Wily Coyote about to get his comeuppance style. Like, why do we teeter on the brink of everything and then make eye contact with everyone watching at home and the bottom falls out? This is why it's so hard. And it's especially so hard for some of us who, we're doing the work. It's just that our work involves untangling a lifetime of limiting beliefs before we can really make it up that hill.
Yeah. And I personally so my husband is a big Greek mythology
Mhm.
geek. And so I love any reference to Sisyphus and
Yeah.
his, and I think it's a beautiful analogy to relate to or to connect to because it is that, famous story that so many of us are familiar with of,
Yeah.
Sisyphus was punished by Zeus and his punishment was he was going to just have to roll a boulder up a hill for the entirety of,
Yeah.
eternity. And how so many of us have done that to ourselves
Yeah. Yeah.
where
There's
we
this.
are punished by our own
Mm.
making.
Yeah. So that first section in chapter 1, actually second section, chapter 1. That's the lawyer in me. Got a reference right. We're talking about the boulder. We're going into that more in depth, and then it ends by me talking about this dream that I legitimately had. This is not poetic license. It's a real dream I had. I write about in Dirt. Of I'm in the trailer I grew up in, and it's sinking. It was on frozen ground, but the ground is giving way, and I'm trying to fill all these garbage bags full of ratty stuffed animals and mildewed sweaters, musty old sweaters. This evidence of something lacking, a scarcity mindset that no longer serves, these emblematic things that tell me where I started was never enough. And this voice that said, there's still time for you. We can still get you out, but you have to be willing to lay that junk down first. And so it's kind of this idea of exactly what you said of we're going up this mountain, we're pushing this boulder, pushing this boulder, pushing this boulder. Whoever told us we had to push so hard to begin with? And so it's the beginning of unraveling that.
Yeah. Well, I want to unpack one of the things that you referenced right away because I love this statement because I've never heard it before.
Oh,
And that is that fear is a boring liar. I had never heard that before. I've never read it anywhere before. I don't know if it's original to you. If it
it
is,
is.
kudos because I truly had never heard this before. And so like what for somebody that's hearing that, like unpack that. Like
Mhm.
this is I feel like a really profound statement. And so, like, where did this originate and how does it actually manifest itself in our lives? Because you say that it's something that we just continue to keep listening to.
That's right. Yeah. So in addition to, being a full-time author now and having a podcast and speaking places, a lot of the rest of my remaining time is spent coaching women, people, women who want to write a book, they want to start a business, they want to be a speaker themselves, whatever the case is. And I just started to notice that all of the women I was coaching and myself were articulating the same kind of fears. And not only that, we were articulating them at the same point in the journey. So like, oh, you've just committed in a really big way to make good on the dream. Like maybe you just signed up for a 2-day intensive here to come work on the proposal. Enter existential dread. And so I was just really like having a day where I was just really like mad at fear. I was mad at fear for just like how it was like keeping so many women, myself included, stuck. And I was doing it in such an like unremarkable way. And so I opened up my phone and I didn't even say a word. I just started like recording this video and I was like, it's all been done. It's all been done better. It's all been done by somebody the world actually wants to pay attention to. I can't start until it's perfect. I can't start until I am perfect. I can't start until I have the entire blueprint and know every step in the staircase. What if I start and I can't stay consistent with it? What if I start and I don't have the bandwidth? What if I start and the critics come? What if they say, who does she think she is? Well, I can't start until, like what if my voice doesn't matter? What if I don't really matter? What if it's already too late? And I just kind of like said, fear's a really boring liar. Fear's not your friend. Start anyway, start now. And put it up there. And it just kind of took off. And everybody was like, yes. Like if we were playing bingo, my hot pink dauber would have run out of ink, right? Like that kind of idea. And so that was like an epiphany in and of itself, Molly. But then an even bigger one came to me. And this is the kind of like your limbic brain connects two dots in a way you've never seen it connected before. High that every writer's chasing. And that is, what if fear attacks creatives in particular because it's jealous that it itself is not creative at all. It is
Mm.
not tethered to muse, it is not tethered to melody, it is not tethered to the original force of all creation, short of being able to throw its voice so that it sounds like you, and to shapeshift and change faces just when you think you know who your enemy is. Fear doesn't really, it's not, imbued with any inherent gifts at all. And I said, fear is not a very creative guy, but he is a busy guy. And like any good, productive overachiever, he's learned how to prioritize. So he's only going to show up when we're doing work that matters.
Mm. And as you were talking, and this is, we can get into deep theological discussions, which I love right now because I'm in
Yes, please.
seminary. But like, like that is the essence of what the enemy does. And
Mhm.
yes, like the word Satan, literally means adversary, accuser. Like
Okay.
it's what it quite literally translates to. And sometimes, not that we're like going to get into this really, like, but the reality is like sometimes people think like, oh, well, there's only like one Satan. There's not.
Mhm.
Like there's lots. And his whole goal is to deceive. His whole goal is to accuse. His whole goal is to be an adversary and to call you to question. And spiritual warfare like is a
Yep.
legit thing. And anytime like you are doing something that matters, that God is calling you to, like the enemy loves nothing more than to come in there and to plant lies and to accuse and to deceive.
Mm.
But there were two things that were really profound that I've heard in the last couple of weeks that I've actually like I've cataloged, and I'm like, that's something I'm just going to continue to like pull up.
Mm.
And the first is that the enemy has power. He does have power, but he has no authority.
Dang. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right? And that just alone was like, okay, like he has power, but he doesn't have authority.
Mm.
So
That's good.
so he's only going to have as much power as one, like God gives him,
Mm.
or two, you give him.
Right.
But he doesn't actually have any authority over your life.
Mm.
And then the second thing is that, like, if you look all throughout scripture, and you could go down a bunch of rabbit holes for this, but like, he is the deceiver, and yet he himself is deceived
Right.
because he is convinced still after all the millennia that he is going to win. He's deceived that he's going to win, that he still has power and authority that he doesn't actually have. And his whole goal is to just like to deceive you because and he's deceiving you because he's deceived himself.
Wow.
And I say that alongside this conversation about fear because it's all connected.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
when you are fearful, you're less likely to do the thing that feels scary,
Mhm.
and you're less likely, so you're gonna end up cowering.
Mm.
And so I'm wondering for you, what has been one of the more surprising or maybe boring lies that fear has told you that you were able to kind of flip that
Yeah.
narrative?
Yeah, I'm gonna say for me, it's so for everybody listening, we start from that premise of fear's a really boring liar, and then chapter by chapter, I go kind of toe to toe with all the different faces fear wears, and then within each chapter, there are like smaller, iterations and variations of it. But so people pleasing, procrastination, perfectionism, overthinking, imposter syndrome, self sabotage, second guessing, criticism, distractions, failure, and even success. And there's more, 14 total. And chapter 10 is perfectionism is hiding with better PR. That's another one of those like, woof, the dots connected in my brain was like, wait, what? Like, what if perfectionism is just, hiding was basically cauliflower, and cauliflower was like, we need a rebrand, right? We need to bring in Don Draper. Is that his name? Don Draper and the Mad Men. And we need to really just like spin
Yes.
this narrative.
Yes.
And one of my favorite parts is like, not since the Got Milk people hasn't like an ad campaign tried to make something so plain Jane vanilla seem so sexy and so
Yeah.
sought after.
Yeah.
Like we're happy to say, oh, I'm just such a perfectionist. I haven't started yet. It's just not quite there yet. My standards are so high. It's an A+ thing, an overachiever thing. I'm just such a perfectionist. What we're not willing to say is, I'm hiding in plain sight because what if it's not as good as I hope it will be? What if I get criticized? What if I get embarrassed? What if I actually have to do something about it once I say it? And so I think for me, perfectionism, the lie that's been really boring that I have started to really get a grip on, but it's shocking. It shouldn't be shocking because fear is really boring, has a very limited repertoire when you really break it down. And a lot of the fears that, Satan used in the Bible thousands of years ago, he's still using today, right? Let me make you question if you're equipped for this,
Yeah.
if you're talented enough for this, if your story disqualifies you from this. So anyway, for me, it was you have to be perfect. You have to be perfect. You have to walk into every room perfect without a hair out of place, not to make anybody feel small, not to hold that over anybody, but because it's the bare minimum standard. And anything less than perfect, you shouldn't show up. So, like this morning, I did a video where we did an unboxing of the final covers of Underestimated showed up. And I filmed it, and like I'm sitting there looking at it, and I'm like, oh, like my hair looks fine in the mirror, and then it looks terrible from that side, and like I have a double chin when I look down at the boxes and said that weird. And oh gosh, are people going to be offended that I talk about like a sharp object in my hand or whatever? I'm like, I have a box cutter and I'm like, that's a weapon. It was just like picking apart every little thing to the point that I was so tempted, Molly, to go, you know what? We'll just try this again tomorrow. I'll just delete these. We'll do a whole new take tomorrow. It'll be better tomorrow. And I was like, you know what? Forget that. I just, that's the great thing about your 40s. You're just like, I'm too tired to do any of that again. And I hit send, and it was just like an immediate like response of people being excited and celebrating this book and like reminding me why it all mattered, and they're looking forward to it. And I would have lost all of that opportunity if I had just been worried about it not being perfect enough. And
Yeah.
I'm just tired of that.
Well, and that speaks right to your whole theme of the sacred order of the underestimated,
Yeah.
which I just love, and how you actually say, like, for those of us among the sacred order of the underestimated, we've become experts in our own internal combustion.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I just absolutely like it's such a powerful way to think about the fact that like we are experts in our own internal combustion.
Yeah.
It's a lot actually, just funny enough today, like, I guess I should say coincidentally, having a conversation with my husband over lunch. So we try to, as much as we can, coordinate our lunches since we both work from home, but he works up in a barn and I work in the house. And we try to have our, at least see each other during lunch. And so we were just talking about something. And because I had a Bible study leader meeting this morning, and we were having this conversation in my Bible study leader meeting about why is it, essentially the question was like, why is it easier for people to resist God, to turn from God, and to find their contentment in the things of the world than find their contentment in God.
Hmm.
And I said, I mean, because a lot of the answers were not wrong, like none of them were wrong, but it was like a lot of Christianese. It was a lot of
Hmm.
like, well, there's and I said, I think the answer really is a whole lot simpler than we're trying to make it, is that it's easier. It's easier to not die to self. It's
Yeah.
easier to like internally combust and try to like seek pleasure from the things of the world than it is to find contentment in a God you can't see.
Yeah.
Like it's just easier. And so to that point, like it's easier for us to be an expert in our own internal combustion and to play the I feel like when you were talking about that video on fear, you reminded me of Randall Pearson, Sterling K. Brown's character in This Is Us when he plays the worst
Okay.
case scenario game.
Yeah.
Like when he's just like when Beth is like just name all of the things that could go wrong and he does.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you were doing is like,
My hairstylist tells me that I remind her of that character all the
yes,
time.
yes. Okay, see? So there's message here, Mary. And it's because it's easier to play the worst case scenario, to lean into the things that we are afraid of, and it is easier to not do it than to do it.
Yeah. And not only that, Molly, our brains are wired to reward us for not doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, so, like, I get into one of the cool things about this book, some friends when I was first, like, really, in the thick of the first draft, I did, like, a call with 4 women who I think are the most avatar target reader for this book, hard story women who've done incredible things, but they've hit an upper ceiling they can't seem to break through because they blink at the last minute. And, I was saying, like, "Listen, can I really talk about, like, Care Bears and, like, in, like, a very serious thought leader book, like Care Bears and then very serious science studies in the same breath?" And they were like, "Mary, this is, like, your Eras Tour book, like, bring all the components of Mary together." And so there's a lot of research and a lot of science in this book, which I find really fascinating. And One of them is in the overthinking chapter, and it's like there is a reason why when you are about to go do the really hard thing, you balk at the ledge and you go do the quick win instead, the instant gratification, like write something on your to-do list just to mark it off because you've already done it kind of thing. And it's actually science. And so when you are really like pushing, like trying to like think your way out of a problem or think your way into moving forward on the dream and you're just like living in the prefrontal cortex. If you've ever felt like I'm going to sneeze through my forehead, that's what it feels like trying to solve this problem is trying to sneeze through your forehead. Then that's getting stuck in the problem solving centers of your brain when really like innovation and true creativity really come alive in the limbic part of your brain, which only turns on when your prefrontal cortex relaxes. And so if you spend too much time up here, this byproduct called glutamate can actually build up in the prefrontal cortex to toxic levels. And so your brain will switch to like instant gratification activities. People just used to think it was like an excuse we used to chase the quick win, but your brain actually does it for a much more serious reason, which is to preserve brain functioning. So there's a reason that it feels like it's much easier to go do the easy thing than to actually do the hard work of sanctification, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm so glad that you said that because, like, one of the things I was like, I don't really know the brain science behind this because I was like, I really feel like a lot of it is just because of the dopamine that you end up
Mm-hmm.
getting from the
Mm-hmm.
thing that's like the easy, the dopamine
Yes.
you get from scrolling on Instagram. Or, I even went, I'm just going to be real. Like, I was talking with my husband about like some pretty a little more serious topics. And I was like, I mean, for example, like it's much easier for somebody who has unfulfilled sexual desires to open up pornography than it is for them to not.
Yeah.
Like that's that like it's the wrestling, the internal wrestling of the brain that just it takes work. It
Yeah.
takes work. So, well, like from that, like if we're the experts of our own internal combustion, how do we then shift away from that and from internal explosions to instead like internal restoration?
I like that word restoration a lot. So the next part in that passage about we're experts in our own internal combustion is this something to the effect of we figured out a way to harness the rotting backyard piles of rejection. So other people telling us you can't do it or you won't be the one to, be the one to go do it. We doubt you, we overlook you. These hot, rotting piles of rejection in the backyard corners of our mind and turn them into jet fuel. There's so it's sort of like this imagery of like we're composting jet fuel to like store away for, future use as an accelerant of explosive proportions. Like just go ahead, underestimate me. That'll be fun. Like it's that sort of energy. And so that's in chapter 1. In chapter 14, which is our last chapter, we actually come full circle to that moment. There are a lot of full circle moments in this book that were just blowing my mind because this is book. I think it's true of all books. This book was one that more than any of the other, of the three, was revealing itself to me as I was writing it. So I'm like literally on the floor being like, what? Is that real? So in chapter 14, I talk about this sugar factory that actually exploded down in Georgia in like 2007, 2008. It was a really horrible accident. A lot of people died. A lot of people got really badly burned. And what happened was that it was a sugar refinery and the like powdered sugar dust had settled in the silos. And the CEO said we weren't doing the housekeeping. And so it accumulated and the sugar dust acted like gunpowder and set off this series of reactions. And I quote in that section a section from Dirt and a section from Slow Growth. The one on Dirt is talking about when I get into law school and I feel like I have a hole in my heart the size of a chest wound. Every time the cold air hits just right, it sends these exposed roots screaming back into action, this sort of root canal the size of a chest wound. And I've tried to backfill it with gold stars and A pluses and brand name labels and degrees and accomplishments and accolades. And none of it worked. It turned out in the end, what I needed was an extraction, not a filling in order to fill that hole in my heart. And so that's, this side of it. And over here in Slow Growth, I talk about sometimes, will I ever matter? You'd be surprised how many times those words have tumbled from my lips. Some days I feel like I might just disappear altogether, dematerialize, a billion atomized molecules floating on the roaring void. And so you take these two things together. In Dirt, I talk about that like God being like a Pez dispenser. Give me the sugary sweet highs of getting everything I ever wanted. Don't worry about like how anemic my faith has become. Just keep the candy coming, God. And so the sugar had become a billion atomized molecules floating on the void. And if we aren't doing the housekeeping to make sure that junk isn't accumulating, then we become this internal explosion. We become this burned out, hollow shell of ourselves because we were chasing sugar dust and we were chasing this fuel that is not sustainable. And what we need is a much more renewable fuel source, something like purpose, if we're going to make it all the way up this mountain.
Yeah, that's
That was a lot of information.
well,
I'm
that's
like in sub-reference 1 in my
no,
first book.
no, I think it's so important because I think it's recognizing and naming those things that then no longer like back to that whole the notion of power and authority is like when you are able to name those things and recognize them, then they no longer have as much power over you.
Okay, I just have to riff on that for a second if I can.
Please.
Okay. This is blowing my mind that you just said this, and you said it, you came at it from a totally different angle than any of the other conversations that I've had. But so, people have been saying what are some of the practicalities of this book? And there are a ton of practicalities throughout the book. There are a ton of tips, whatever. To me, the most important work that this book does is A, it shows you that fear is such a boring liar and it kind of lays them all out. But B, my whole goal, and we learned this from teaching photography courses, that, humans are hardwired to learn best through story and through very unexpected visual metaphors. The greatest teacher who ever walked the planet taught in story and very unexpected visual
Just gonna
metaphors.
say that, yes.
And when the people didn't understand the metaphor, he wasn't like, okay, so here's what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. He's like,
Right,
let me tell you another metaphor, right?
right.
And so what I have done is, in addition to identifying all the different faces of fear, I have gone to give them these incredibly visceral, unexpected, sometimes quirky imagery to associate with them. So one of my favorite ones is in chapter 4, which is second guessing is a missing handbook. And it goes through this whole big, really fun description of what this missing handbook looks like. It's no embellishments on the cover. It's the stealth wealth of information, whatever. Really fun description of it. But then for some of us, we don't feel like we were the 8-year-old Chad sitting at the family dinner one night. Chad, pass the mashed potatoes. And oh, by the way, make sure you understand compound interest, right? We've been sort of having to figure it out ourselves for all these grown up years. And so then I take that and I compare it to Edward Scissorhands. And I say, for those of us who feel like we are missing this handbook, we never got this handbook, it's like we're walking around the world without all the pertinent parts.
Yes.
Like Edward Scissorhands dropped down right in the middle of some pastel suburban hell. We find that when we break the rules because we did not know the rules, we are somehow the ones who die death by 1,000 cuts. And then it kind of goes on and riffs on that for a while. But so now that person who's like me, who feels like they never got the missing handbook, that's one visual they can hold on to of okay, here's why I feel like no matter what I choose, I will always choose wrong. And somebody else would always choose better. They have information I did not get. But I can actually put this really tender, empathetic, raw, little bit of a raw wound. Edward Scissorhands, you could have the kindest heart imaginable, but one slip up and they'll run you right out of town. Right. And so the next time they're in that position, somebody can be like, Edward Scissorhands problem. That's what's happening. Oliver Twist problem. Princess and the Pea problem. Research Riptide problem. And I was on a show a couple days ago. Sarah Rice on This Changes Everything said, yeah, it's kind of like in The Wizard of Oz where you have the great and powerful, terrifying Oz. And somebody pulls back the curtain and all the power runs out of the room. Right? It just diffuses fear of all that
Yes.
power. If I can give somebody these very memorable, visceral, very easy, quick to recall, because they're just so quirky and unexpected, language to go, I know what you're doing, fear. I know what you're doing. And it's not going to make fear leave the room, but it is going to just diffuse it of all its power.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, that is I could not agree more because it's something that I feel really passionate about. It's why I'm a storyteller as well.
Yeah.
And I think that you and I are just so similar in that respect. And it is because, yeah, like people that is our brains are just hardwired to connect like that. But that is when you are able to name those things, when you are able to recognize those things, that's when it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I think for me, like something. So I'm working with a mentor right now, and I never really kind of worked in a formal like mentor mentee relationship before. I've always had kind of people I've looked up to, but this is somebody I you know, personally sat down and said, "Would you be my mentor for this season?" And so one of the things that we're doing together is I said, "I need you to help me name some of these things that are holding me back from growing in this area." And so identifying some of the areas that I know I need to grow in, but bringing somebody else in to
Yeah.
recognize here is what is holding you back. And actually was really interesting. Like we were having lunch and we always meet over food because everything is better for chips and salsa.
Yeah, it is.
It
Some
just is.
guacamole in there.
You just have better
Yeah.
conversations when you have Mexican restaurant diet and
Yes.
chips and salsa.
Well, I'll say regular Coke, but
Yeah.
yes. Yes.
But for me, my brain just functions at a higher level in those,
It's like unlimited.
I I know. I need some arroz con pollo. And anyway, but truly, like we have some of our deepest conversations in Mexican restaurants, I'm telling you.
Nice.
And I was kind of wrestling with something, and I realized that there was like something that was holding me back in a relationship that and with somebody that I'm, kind of is in my sphere. And she said, I think what you haven't named is that you need it was something that I'd felt hurt by, that I had been kind of holding on to this thing, needing an apology. And she was like, I think that what you've done is you haven't named that. And so what that's
Mm,
done is you've then built up a little bit of resentment
yeah.
cloaked in kindness. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Wow.
did not want to hear that.
Ouch.
I
Ouch.
know. She was like, you've built up resentment cloaked in kindness. And she said, and so what you have to do is you have to either let it go,
Mm,
or you have to go to them and tell them.
yeah.
And she said, or you can even do something that's even more humbling, and that's encourage them. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't, you know what I mean? But and I realized that I'm kind of trying to be a little careful in how I share this, but it was one of those moments where I knew what I needed to do,
Mm,
but it actually took someone else recognizing it and naming that
that's right.
in me for me to then be able to do the work and be able to heal from it. And I can say like a month later, 2 months later, like I'm in a much better place
Mhm.
than I was with this situation. And so I share that example because I think sometimes we think, and forgive me if like because maybe I just didn't get to this part in your book yet. So I'm
That's
really,
okay.
but one of the things I think that's important, I'd love for you to, because I know that you involve community and people, and you speak so much to mentoring and working with coaching and things like that. Is sometimes when we're unable to recognize what is holding ourselves back. And so by then reaching out to someone else to
Yeah.
bring them into our own stories and to be vulnerable enough to say, I need you to walk alongside me. I need an accountability partner. I need a mentor. I need somebody else to maybe even call out those things, because I know that this is something that you're really passionate about. That's
Yeah.
why I share that part of this, is that sometimes, for the person listening who's like, all of what you guys have said sounds really great, but I'm too scared to do this by myself. And
Mm,
sometimes the answer is you don't have to do this by yourself.
right. Yeah.
That can be a really difficult, fearful, fear laden step.
Yes. Gosh, I got like 5 things I wanna say
I
about
know.
that. I'm
I'm
gonna
so
try to organize. No, 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 it's good. I'm just trying to,
It's
like,
always
organize
the
it in
way.
my brain. Okay, so here's what comes up for me when you say that. Number 1, this is why, I talk about more so in Slow Growth in this book, but I talk about this idea of, like, your people should be mirrors, not microscopes. Mirrors will show you who you are and who you're becoming. Microscopes will hold you in one place for easier scrutiny. If you think about like a microscope, those little slides and the little arms that come and hold it in one place. And so having somebody who can kind of hold up that mirror and go, you're saying this, but here's what I'm hearing. Do we want to name that? So that's number one, is making sure you have those mirror kind of people in your life. Number two, one of the biggest reasons we need to name this fear is because when it goes unnamed, as you have just described experiencing, it becomes this kind of mythical colossus in our minds. And I'm referencing a part in the book. This is in chapter 7. Overthinking is an orange safety cone. And I go through this whole big deep dive on overthinking itself. And then it's like we think we're done. And then it's like, hold on, hold on. Let's look at this overlapping shore, this Venn diagram where perfectionism and overthinking join forces in some really unexpected ways. And one of them I lovingly refer to as the Colossus of Clout, and it's from The Sandlot. And it's talking about, Smalls didn't know who the great Bambino was. And so all the boys are reacting and they're like, the Sultan of SWAT, the King of Swing. And there are these two brothers, Timmy and Tommy, and one of them goes, the Colossus of Clout. And the other one goes, the Colossus of Clout. And like just repeats it, but louder.
Yeah.
And it goes on to talk about, like, in the movie, you're going to love this because of the full reference to mythology.
Yeah.
There was this beast living next door they only caught glimpses of through the fence, who they, in their minds, let them run wild and it became a much bigger threat than it was. Turned out to be a really sweet dog named Hercules, a
Mhm.
mythical colossus, but only in their minds. And so that's kind of that idea of like when we name it, we're going back to the Wizard of Oz, we're taking all the power out of the room. Two more things that I'll say on that.
Yes.
The next is just sort of, we're talking about the person listening who this sounds really hard and it sounds really scary to reach out to somebody. And rather than me saying right now in this moment, like, just do it, it's so easy or it'll be so worth it, which all of that is like can be true. I want to meet you in a place of deep empathy because in chapter 10, which we referenced earlier, perfectionism is hiding with better PR. I actually talk about how this combination of characteristics in my story from being, a child of the 80s where we were all basically feral cats left to fend for ourselves, a proud Appalachian where the last thing in the world we ever want to have to do is be in a position to ask somebody else for help, and being an Enneagram 4 with a very strong wing 3 who does not like to show weakness. It has turned me into somebody who walks around in the world in some very hyper vigilant, self-sufficient to the point of self-sabotaging ways. And I have this string of sentences that I almost cut because they're very vulnerable. But I ultimately left them in, and I'm hearing from people already that they're super resonating with it. It's like, I don't want you feeling sorry for me. I don't want you to avert your eyes in some sort of sympathy shame on my behalf. While we're at it, unless specifically asked, I don't want your advice, your opinions, your good practices. They run in my ears, run down my throat, and taste like condescension. I don't want you worrying about me. Then I'll just have to worry about you worrying about me. And it goes on in that chapter to basically say, it turns out priding yourself on not needing people is a really great way not to have any. So there's probably another thing that I was thinking of, but that was a lot of talking, and I'm sure that a few things have come up for you. So we'll just kind of leave it at those three, where it is like, cherish your mirror people when you find them. Let them hold up a mirror and show you who you are and what you're becoming. Make sure that you are not letting this fear that goes unnamed become a mythical colossus, and don't pride yourself so much on not needing somebody that you end up not having people.
Yeah. No, I think that that is, yeah. I mean, I think that that's one of those lessons that is incredibly difficult for us, especially in our individualistic society and culture that we have a hard time with. And we just end up creating this world in which we are on our own lonely island, and we look around and suddenly it's like, well, wait, how did I get here? But then
Yeah,
when you actually zoom out and you look, and it's like, we put ourselves there.
that's right.
And that's a hard pill to swallow at times, but you don't have to stay stuck there.
Yeah.
And so, but in order to get off of that lonely island, so I guess I feel like I have to say this for the person listening that feels like they're on the lonely island. And I don't
Mhm.
say that you put yourself there in a condemning way. That's not my heart at all. But I think it is important to sometimes recognize it can be really easy. And I also, I'm sensitive to, like, there's all sorts of scenarios that can happen in our lives. But a lot of times it starts with us, and it starts with looking at, how do we be vulnerable enough to make amends where amends need to be made, to reach out and, apologize. I mean, I
Mm,
remember, like, I talk about this some in my book, is when I had reached my rock bottom, and I was so broken, I was so
mm,
isolated, I was so ashamed of the mistakes that I'd made, and yet I continued in this cycle of making more mistakes. But in the process, I had alienated a lot of people around me.
yeah.
And it had to come to a point where I had to realize that, like, yes, some circumstances in my life were really difficult, and I had been dealt a really difficult deck of cards, but also at the same time, like, a lot of it was my fault.
Mm,
And I had to come to a point where I couldn't blame others at any point, and I had to just realize that, yes, like, I was in a lot of ways, like, playing the hand that I was dealt, but I
yeah.
could have handled it a little bit differently or better.
Mm,
And so in that process of getting myself off of, because I was the person on the lonely island. So that's why I feel like I can say this, because I'm
mhm,
speaking from experience, and that I was the person on the lonely island. And number one, first I had to surrender to God, and I had to ask God, one, for forgiveness, and
mm.
he then had to help build me a boat to get off the island. And then I'm
Right.
really going with the analogy here. Then at that point, I had to then recognize, like, I was so isolated. I had burned a lot of the relationships in my life. And what I had to do was I had to reach out. I had to take that very scary step and reach out to some of the people, like the one of the people that immediately comes to mind is like my roommate from college, Jane Berry, who I talk about her in the book. She's just one of my oldest and dearest friends from college, and I had really hurt her in that time, and it wasn't intentional. I wasn't trying to hurt her, but in my own pain and in my own suffering, I had hurt my friend. And
Yeah.
so I had lost that relationship, and I had to humble myself enough to reach out to her and say, "I miss you and I would really like to get together." And so guess what? We met over chips and salsa at Plaza
I'm
Azteca.
gonna pick a fight with you just so we can
I
have
know. And so we went to a Mexican restaurant, and I sat down and I cried and I said, "Thank you for meeting me." And I said, "I just know I need to make amends. I need to apologize." And I said, "I'm not making excuses, but I need you to know like what was going on in my life." And let her in. And so I just for the next couple hours, I was vulnerable. I said all of the things, Mary, and then I ultimately ended with, "Will you forgive me?"
wow.
And she, of course, said yes. And we were able to begin the process of restoring that relationship. But I had to do that a few times. And so sometimes, like, that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, it is.
And so I think that that's just my encouragement to somebody who's like, sometimes, and again, I don't know all the different scenarios and nuances of our lives, but just sometimes we have to humble ourselves when and realize like what are the areas that maybe we had some missteps and need to take
Mm,
that next step to then begin to heal and invite people back into our lives so that we can have the mirror friends, we can have the mirror mentors,
yeah.
and rather than the microscope people.
That's right. You know what that made me think of is, that's also so good, and it made me think of it's like a kind of a there's laterally, that's the word, a laterally connected point, but I think it's actually it kind of gets it's like the same thing you're saying, but in a different way is, in chapter 8, procrastination is a double-edged sword.
Mm,
It's talking about there's a section that's talking about why procrastinators never seem to learn from their mistakes. We repeat the lesson
yes.
until it is learned, only we never seem to learn it. And it's talking about the difference between what's called a downward counterfactual and an upward counterfactual. And so a downward counterfactual is like an exercise in at least. Well, at least I got turned in on time, even if it was like an all nighter. At least I still got a good grade, even though I bet it could have been better if I gave myself more time. At least whatever. At least I didn't get an incomplete. I'm just they're all
Yeah.
turning into paper analogies, which is one of the ones I talk about in the book. But anyway, so downward counterfactual is an exercise in at least I call it it's like a silver linings playbook. Like they're constantly looking for how it all still managed to turn out. An upward counterfactual, on the other hand, goes, wow, think about how much less stress I would have been if I'd given myself more time. Think about, like it gives the example of Bonnie on the TV show Mom. She's like they live in the apartment building for free because she's the super, but she never does any of the work. And then they're going to like fill out the, reports, the customer survey reports or whatever. And she suddenly is trying to get it all done. And she's like, huh, complaining about this took me like 6 months. Doing it took like 6 minutes. I feel like there's a lesson there. Only you get the distinct impression she hasn't learned a thing. Upward counterfactual is willing to say, this is what I did. I'm going to acknowledge the pain that it brought me. And I'm not going to like try to gloss over it so that I can actually learn from it. And that kind of like builds on some other stuff we talk about in the failure chapter. Failure is a bankrupt identity. Chapter 11, failure is a bankrupt identity. I was quite proud of that naming right there. Chapter 11, bankruptcy. See, it's not about bankruptcy at all. But it is about this idea of like, we will sometimes try so hard to avoid the pain of acknowledging a failure because we don't want it to become we are the failure, our identity, that we'll pretend like nothing happened at all. And we just kind of gloss over it and we never learn from it. So it's kind of like, it's what you're saying. It's like we have to kind of deal with this was actually really painful and it was my fault in some ways, like let's deal with the parts that were my fault and under my control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's so powerful. Man, Mary, I have just like so many other questions I want to ask you. And but I guess to close to conclude because this episode could be 4 hours long. But I'm not Joe Rogan.
Part 47.
I'll be honest, I don't know how that guy does it. Like 3 4 hour long podcasts. I don't know. And my husband really into Jocko.
Okay.
To Jocko Willing, and Jocko's podcast. Like he'll listen to Jocko, and Jocko's episodes are like 3 to 4 hours long. I'm like, how does this guy do it? I'm like, I don't. Anyway, all that to say is, kind of in closing, is obviously we've been talking about a lot of the themes of underestimated, and there's a lot in fear, and our kind of propensity to play small. But I would love for you to just kind of share ultimately your heart for this book and like who you are really hoping is the person that picks it up
Mm,
and what your prayer is for that person.
yeah. The by far and away most bullseye target reader for this book are the people who, the dedication in the book, the very first page talks about like the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross quote, beautiful people don't just happen. And, I go on to say like hard story people are my kind of people. Pain, like progressively finer grits of paper, has rounded off the hard edges, making us soft places to land for others. But at the same time, that muddy story makes us doubt that someone like us could ever do the thing, right? That I've been saying this book is for the one who feels like they're being called up to greatness, they're being called up to more, but at the very same time, you simultaneously doubt that someone like you could ever get there. And so here's what I'm going to tell you, Molly. I feel like I was specifically put on this earth to serve the hard story people, to serve the family tree changers, the generation changers, the people where, our friend Hannah Bruncher talks about a Sharpie line through the calendar, dividing the calendar into a before and after. Well, these are the people who are going to divide their family tree into a before and an after. And in so many ways, these people have already come so far. Maybe they were the first in their family to go to college. They maybe are the first to own a home. Maybe they're parenting really differently, doing their finances really differently, whatever the case is. But they have hit an upper limit. And that upper limit is like, I just keep starting over. Like I'm my own worst enemy. Like, why do I keep dropping the boulder at the very last minute? Because I feel like if that group of people could be set free from this icy grip of fear, it's like I've been joking, like it's like Mean Girls, like the limit does not exist for what these people could go do, the change that they could have in the world. And so from the very bottom of my heart, like hand raised to God, I believe this book is going to change family trees. I believe it's going to set people free of this return to chaos and instability that they just don't know why they can't shake because it's familiar, from their childhood. And there's a lot there, and we go deep, and it's a transformational arc. Like read this bad boy from start to finish. Don't skip around. Each one builds on the one that came before. But I truly, truly believe we're going to see a generation of women in particular, but men as well, but people who are changing their family trees, just like that, those chains we talked about, tripping them up, those limiting beliefs tied up around their ankles are going to break loose. And we're just going to see these people sprint, full forward on the purpose and the good work that was prepared for them in advance. And I pray that when I get to heaven, I'm going to get just a glimpse, like a movie montage of just like all the things that happened, because fear stopped having the loudest voice in the room. We pulled back the curtain and all the power ran out of the room that fear had. So that's what I'll say about that.
That's so good, Mary. As you were talking and kind of just throughout this conversation, I don't know if this is something you do, but I feel like your book needs to have a theme song.
Oh,
And I don't know if you've heard this song. We just started singing it at church, and I had not heard it until the last couple months. And so it's a newer worship song, but it's called "Made for More" by Bethel.
okay. I'm going to look that up.
And the chorus is I wasn't made to be tending in a grave. I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I
Mm,
was made for more.
wow. That's
And
beautiful. I have a
and
beautiful.
then
Have you never sung for me
oh
before?
gosh.
Sung?
But it goes on just about how we weren't called to be, again, tending a grave. We weren't called to be dead in our shame. We were not called for any, like
Wow.
God called, he made us for more. And I just feel like that song, the
I'm having like
verses
head
and
to
the
toe
chorus.
chills right now.
Oh,
Just
I'm
chills.
telling you, when you get off of that, like go listen to that song,
Okay.
because I just feel like it is the heartbeat of this message.
Yep.
And it's just that God did not call you to play small. He did not call you
Yep.
to shrink back. He made you for more than you realize. And so
Love
that's
that.
just my heart and my prayer for you.
Mm,
I love
it's
you
good.
so much.
I love
Thank you so much
you.
for being.
Oh my gosh. I have two quick things for your people, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Two super quick. One of them is I introduced these characters actually first in Slow Growth, as you probably remember, Molly, but they
Yes.
carry over into Underestimated, and they are the 5 achiever types.
Yes.
And this time we talk about them from like the perspective of like how and why they play small and where they get stuck and where they get tripped up along the way. And so we have the performer who's always on her toes, wanting to show both herself and other people how far she's come. So I am the performer.
Yes.
The tightrope walker could care less who's clapping, but they need higher and higher death defying feats to feel the same amount of good. The masquerader hides in plain sight and shoves other people into the spotlight. The contortionist is our classic people pleaser. They contort because it is easier than to be criticized. And the illusionist in the distance believes that all the conditions to begin and they themselves must be perfect before they can even start. And so if you go to achieverquiz.com or marymarantz.com/quiz, Marantz is my last name, then the quiz itself takes like 10 minutes, 2 minutes if you do it really fast, just go on gut
Yeah.
instinct. It's like 10 questions. And we go light and easy on the questions. And then in a true Mary form, we go deep and hard in the results. And that felt like a Tina Turner quote or something. We're going to take it nice
Yeah.
and easy,
I like
and then we're going to go hard. No, but we go deep in the results of like why each type gets tripped up playing small and how you actually break out of that and move forward. So that's achieverquiz.com. And then if you go to namethefear.com, that's where we have all the information up for the book. And we actually have for your listeners that they can go right now. If they go to namethefear.com, we have the entire first chapter up there for free. They can download it and start reading it for free today. Check it out, get a feel for my writing. And while you're there, because as Molly will tell you, pre-orders are huge, huge, huge for getting
Yes.
good books out in the world. If you don't
Yes.
have all the, celebrity connections and the millions of followers, pre-orders are where it's at. We have the first 3 chapters are available for you if you pre-order and the audiobook. So it's kind of like getting 2 books for the price of
That's
one.
awesome. And Mary's amazing voice reads it.
And I
And
read it.
so
I'll
it's
whisper to you for hours. So that's at namethefear.com. You can check that out. Pre-orders are huge. They would mean the world. And then at Mary Marantz on Instagram, come tell me if you listen to the episode, what your achiever type is, all the
yes.
things. You can watch me unbox the book, see my double chin.
No, no,
It's
Mary.
fine. It's
Well, I will
fine.
have all of that in the show notes for everyone. So please, yes, go get this book. And Mary, I just, like I said, before we started recording, I just adore you. I'm so grateful for you. I can't believe we've known each other as long as we have. And I'm just
Wow.
truly, it's a joy and a gift to watch you face the fear and push through the fear and to step out into the giftings that God's given you.
I love you. Thank
Yeah.
you.